Welcome everyone, I'm Lynn from Finds of Yesterday, and today we're discussing Napier jewelry. We're going to talk about the early days of Napier from 1875 to 1950 because there's so much to learn about this company. We're going to discuss the incorporation of the company, types of jewelry, the wartime jewelry, and the direction the company went in. This company had such a confusing start. Napier began its journey as Whitney and Rice in 1875. It changed hands, locations, names so many times that it was hard to keep up. Then there was a new commencement date of 1878, and in 1928 Napier issued a 50-year anniversary postcard which dated the company to 1878. One in-house document clearly stated that the company was founded in 1878 by Mr. E.A. Bliss and makes no mention of Whitney and Rice. It was known as E.A. Bliss Company and incorporated in 1882 in Massachusetts. In the 1880s, it moved its location to New York. The company established itself as a quality manufacturer and proved immensely prosperous for the jewelry industry. But in 1890, the E.A. Bliss Company relocated its business to Meridian, Connecticut because of the need for a larger facility. Here you'll see the first mark that they used under E.A. Bliss Company. It's actually EAB with the B on top of the A. And that's the logo they used from 1890s to 1919. Many types of items were manufactured, from belts, garters, chatelaines, buckles, sash pins in various materials such as German silver, glass beads, nickel silver, enamel, gold finishes, and silver plate. Edwardian style was in at that time, and here is an example of the turn of the century jewelry. This brooch was from 1900 to 1915 in brass. It is die stamped, gold plated, it has bezel set rose cut domed amber rhinestones in it, and it has a tube hinge which is on the bottom left and a C catch which is on the big picture. The tube hinge was commonly used, and there's a soldered on trademark patch you'll see in the middle there. After E.A. Bliss, the founder, died in 1911, his son William E. Bliss took over, but the company began to falter. They brought on Mr. James Napier somewhere around 1916 to 1918, the records are unclear, as the managing director of E.A. Bliss Company. In 1910 to the 1920s, the E.A. Bliss Company created more than just brooches and jewelry. They created mesh bags, purses, belt buckles, hair ornaments, and compacts as well. Let's take a look at some of the jewelry from that time frame. Here is a piece of Art Nouveau sash pin. It has Art Nouveau stampings, intricate openwork, magnificent stones. Most brooches have a distinct gilt plate over brass. They continued to import stones and findings from manufacturers in Europe. Here are a couple bangles from the 1910s. They're ornate filigree brass. They're die stamped, gold plated, with glass crystal chatons. Here are some examples of screwback earrings. They used brass, glass, plastic resin, and they were die stamped, and some were silver plated and some were gold plated. If you look at the bottom picture here on the left, it says E.A. Bliss with the logo. Their necklaces were long. They had precious stones in them, and usually a pendant was hanging. They had Art Nouveau styles. They used green faux jade, brass, gold-plated again. Ivory was used from 1919 to 1921. They did celluloid and brass, and They had carved Art Deco designs as well, and they were marked Bliss in an oval tag. Let's take a look at that. Here's what the Bliss logo looked like from 1919 to 1922. Here we reach 1920 till 1930, so there was post-war optimism that things were going to get better. Many styles can be attributed to the 20s. The public was embracing modernistic, geometric, Aztec, Victorian Revival, Napoleonic, Spanish, Rococo, and Asian, and especially Egyptian Revival with the discovery of King Tut's tomb. They had shorter sleeves, which influenced the width of the bracelets. They used celluloid, bakelite, and Catalin, which increased in rich shades of red and amber. Pearl necklaces were worn singly or wrapped many times. Flappers enjoyed ornaments hung on cord or strands of beads made from crystal, lapis, jade, and cornelian stones. Long style beaded necklaces were called fancies and were made with spacers or metal beads and are associated with the deco fashion. Jet necklaces in lengths of 27-inch to 54-inch with tassel ends were popular, and at the end of the 20s a trend emerged for chokers and pendants. March 1920 marks the date that James Napier became president, and in October of 1920 the company was renamed the Napier Bliss Company. Then 2 years later in 1922, upon James Napier purchasing a controlling interest in the company, the stockholders voted to rename the company the Napier Company. Here's a look at the Napier logo at that time frame. The pointed end ones was not used on much of the jewelry. It used capital Sanskrit letters, and it was registered 1921, but it lasted till about 1946. The oval one you'll find more on jewelry pieces. Then we reach the 1930s, which brought about East Indian Moroccan motifs and revisiting Victorian designs in machinist style. With each year, jewelry became bigger and bolder. Charm bracelets were popular, gold was keynote, clip-on earrings were in a triangle shape, usually. Large rhinestone pins had a regal style, basket and flower motifs, pink, green, and blue stones were used a lot. Sets were becoming popular. Bristol and Catalin and thermoset plastics made by the Catalin Corporation of America was becoming popular. Bracelets that were used wide. They were wide and engine turned. The French filigree that you'll see here on the left was used. These are all hinged bangles, and gold embossed and charm bracelets were popular. In brooches, retro style, they were die stamped, gold plated, colored rhinestones were used. In necklaces, the big bib necklaces were becoming popular, and velvet ribbon chokers, dog collar necklaces, and coral in pink and white. Then we reach the 1940s, which is during wartime. 1940 to 1945 brought about many restrictions of different metals. On December 31st of 1941, the OPM restricted tin by 50%, and by February 14th of 1942, the WPB froze all supplies of tin held by manufacturers in the jewelry industry. Also, on January 1st of 1942, other metals became restricted, including copper, brass, and bronze, and later was expanded to aluminum, chrome, nickel, lead, and iridium. Manufacturers had to switch to an alloy of zinc and antimony, and also sterling was used, but the cost was so high, about double in price at cost. It is 92.5% silver and 7.5% copper, so it was in danger too. Metal supply, excluding gold, had severely decreased, and the industry struggled. Another issue at that time was getting stones, beads, and findings from Czechoslovakia. The start of the war halted imports, but many manufacturers expected that to happen, so they stockpiled their materials. But their stock was running low. By mid-1945, many of the restrictions had eased and manufacturers were feeling optimism towards a new beginning. By the end of 1946, many metals were now becoming available. Mr. Napier's desire was to be the leader in not only costume jewelry, but also in manufacturing jewelry made of sterling silver. Here are some paper tags. The ones were used for sterling silver in the 1940s and some in the 1950s. I also wanted to show you this barrier spring clip clasp, which was used from the 1940s to the 1970s. You can see it has a little bar across it. They called that like a barrier, and it was stamped with Napier or sterling on it. And a lot of times these are faked, so you have to be careful when finding a piece to make sure that it is real. Materials during this 1940 to 45 time frame was sterling silver, enameling, and lucite. And people at home were making jewelry, so there was a lot of homemade novelty jewelry, and they used yarn, ceramic, leather, wood, shell, macaroni, and other natural materials. With the country at war, jewelry became sentimental, romantic, or nostalgic, and Victorian revival became popular in reproductions of cameos and chatelaines and cherubs, floral motifs in the Rococo revival, asymmetrical motifs with bows, ribbons, and florals. Regular jewelry, simple and clean lines were used. Sweetheart jewelry to honor loved ones, and patriotic and retro. Large scale of the 1930s became delicate neckline adornments. Napier did more simple tailored brooches, fur clips, bracelets, and earrings. Motto jewelry was popular with sayings like "Light Your Way," "Victory," and "I Love America." Many women worked at Napier during the wartime because their men were off fighting the war. Towards the end of the war, the women suggested to management to create some base metal jewelry, mainly just for the sale to them, the employees. But they were liked so much that some pieces were given to Napier road salesmen, and it led to the golden age of Napier fashion jewelry, despite Mr. Napier's version of being the Tiffany of all manufacturers of sterling items. By August of 1945, Napier returned to its former production, but with expanded departments and renovated facilities, and sales boomed. Napier produced Purple Hearts, Medals of Honor, and Distinguished Service Crosses, as well as plated and sterling silver novelty items. Sterling jewelry was still being made, but there was a drastic drop in sales. Trifari and Monet had gained a significant part in the sales by shifting their attention immediately back to costume jewelry. Napier continued selling its sterling and gold-plated sterling, which is vermeil, through fine jewelry stores. Since Napier used engine turning, sterling was the best option. Base metals did not have that molecular structure to produce a fine and perfect line. It was jagged. They produced retro-style designs of fine rose gold on sterling pins and earrings sets during this time period. Also done was necklaces and fur clips, identification bracelets, and large-length sterling gold-plated bracelets. In 1946, a new collection called Garden of Gold was introduced and trademarked in 1953. It used cultured pearls, genuine stones, and hand-carved ivory, with large percentage of the line offering a soft matte finish. It was sterling silver covered with layers of 18-karat gold plate. The line was expanded, but sales failed to meet expectations. Here are a couple of the end of the 40s decade pieces. By 1947, Napier management was not pleased with sales of gold on sterling jewelry. Giftware was their primary source of sales. Again, the Napier road salesmen began to demand a competitive product to Monet and Trifari. This time, management listened. The small amount of base metal jewelry that Napier made sold out immediately. Since 100% sold out, that was the direction the Napier Company followed. In 1947, Frederick Rettenmeyer, head of the design department, hired Eugene Bertoli, who would help propel the Napier Company into a position of the most creative and outstanding fashion jewelry manufacturer in the world. It wasn't easy, but it took 3 years to take the line in a new direction. So I want to do a shout out to Melinda Lewis for writing this book. It took her 8 years, and it's 1,000 pages later. It is so full of information, such detailed information about Napier from beginning to end, which it hasn't ended. So if you're looking for a great resource for Napier jewelry, please go out and buy this book today. I learned so much from reading this book, and all the information in this video was compiled from this book. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope that you learned something about Napier in the early days. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and look for the next video for the 50s and 60s, and then probably from then on to modern days. So thanks again.